I still remember the weight of that champagne flute in my hand. Crystal. Baccarat. The kind that catches light like it's holding liquid diamonds. It was Nathan's wedding day, my son, my only child, and I was standing on a rooftop in Manhattan, the kind of venue where you pay extra just so people can see the skyline while they judge your life choices. I'd worn the dress, you know the one. The dress I'd been saving for 23 years. Vintage Dior couture from an estate sale in Paris back when I could still afford to dream. $500,000. I know it sounds insane. But you have to understand, this wasn't just fabric, this was history. This was the one beautiful thing I owned that nobody could take from me. Or so I thought. I was lifting my glass to toast Clarissa, my new daughter-in-law, though calling her that makes my throat tight even now. She stood there in her imported silk Vera Wang, looking like every Pinterest board ever made had a baby with old money. Her smile was camera-ready, her posture perfect. I wanted to like her. God, I tried. To New Beginnings, I said, my voice warm despite the cold knot in my stomach. That's when it happened. One drop. Just one tiny drop of champagne slipped from the rim of my glass and landed on her gown. On the hem. You could barely see it. A pinprick. A ghost of a stain that would disappear with one trip to the dry cleaner. But Clarissa saw it. The entire rooftop seemed to inhale at once. 200 guests in Armani and Chanel, all holding their breath like they were watching a nature documentary right before the lioness strikes. Clarissa's smile didn't falter. That's what I remember most. How her lips stayed curved, how her eyes stayed bright like a doll's eyes, dead behind the shine. She picked up her wine glass. Bordeaux. Deep, blood-red Bordeaux that probably cost more than most people's car payments. And then she poured it. Not splashed, not accidentally tipped, poured. Slowly, deliberately. Like she was watering a plant. The wine hit my chest first, cold shock against my skin. Then it spread, cascading down the hand-stitched bodice, soaking into the silk that had survived 70 years only to die on a rooftop in Tribeca. I watched it happen in slow motion. Watched $500,000 turn into a wine-soaked rag. Watched decades of sacrifice and saving pool at my feet in a puddle of vintage Bordeaux. The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a fork. In the corner of my vision, I saw Nathan, my son, my beautiful boy, turn his head away. Not toward me. Away. Away from me. Clarissa leaned in then, close enough that I could smell her Chanel No. 5, close enough that her whisper was just for me, though somehow I knew she wanted others to hear. Now you look like the poor little burden you really are. Her voice was honey. Sweet poison. She straightened up, laughed that tinkling laugh that sounds like expensive wind chimes, and turned to the crowd with her hands up in mock horror. Oh my God, I'm so clumsy. Briella, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning, of course. But her eyes told a different story. Her eyes said, I know what I did. Her eyes said, and there's nothing you can do about it. I stood there, dripping, ruined. In front of everyone who mattered and everyone who didn't. The photographers had stopped taking pictures. The band had gone quiet. Even the New York City skyline behind us seemed to dim, like the universe itself was embarrassed for me. Nathan appeared at Clarissa's side, not mine. He put his arm around her waist, protective, apologetic. Mom, accidents happen, he said, barely meeting my eyes. Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. Those 4 words hit harder than the wine. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father left. The boy I'd worked 3 jobs for so he could go to Columbia. The boy who used to curl up next to me on our threadbare couch and promise that when he grew up, he'd take care of me the way I took care of him. And he was telling me not to make a scene. I opened my mouth. Closed it. The words I wanted to say sat on my tongue like broken glass, too sharp to swallow, too dangerous to spit out. So I smiled. I smiled the way you smile when you're drowning but don't want anyone to call for help. Of course, I heard myself say, accidents happen. I set down my champagne flute carefully, so carefully because my hands were shaking, and I walked toward the elevator. Each step left a small wine stain on the white marble floor, a trail of evidence. A path of humiliation. Behind me, the party resumed. Music swelled. Laughter bubbled up like champagne. And I realized something in that elevator, as I descended 60 floors in a wine-soaked Dior gown that would never be beautiful again. I had spent 23 years being Nathan's mother, his protector, his soft place to fall, but somewhere along the way I'd forgotten to be anything else. I'd forgotten to be Briella. The elevator doors opened onto the Manhattan street. Evening air hit my face cold, sharp, real. And that was the moment I finally understood who my son had married. More importantly, that was the moment I understood what I was going to do about it. The elevator doors closed, and all I could hear was the hum of descent 60 floors down, back to street level, back to reality, but my mind wasn't in that elevator, it was somewhere else entirely. It was in a Queens apartment with peeling wallpaper and radiators that clanked all night long. You see, Nathan was 3 when Richard died. Heart attack. No warning. One Tuesday morning, my husband kissed me goodbye and collapsed in a midtown subway station before he ever made it to work. I got the call at my desk. I was a junior analyst at a small investment firm back then, barely making enough to cover rent. They asked me if I wanted to see the body. I said yes. I needed to see him one last time before I became everything Nathan would ever need. The years that followed weren't a story, they were a series of survival tactics disguised as love. I worked. God, did I work? 60, 70-hour weeks. I'd leave Nathan with Mrs. Chen downstairs, sweet woman who smelled like jasmine tea and never asked for much, though I always paid her what I could. Sometimes that meant choosing between her fee and my own lunch. I chose her fee. Every time. I'd walk through February snowstorms to pick Nathan up from PS 139 because the subway was running late, and I couldn't bear the thought of him standing alone on those steps, scanning the crowd for a face that wouldn't come. His little Batman backpack, his untied shoelaces, the way his whole face would light up when he finally saw me rounding the corner, breathless and frozen. "Mommy," he'd shout, and I swear to God, that word was worth every frozen step. When Nathan was 14, Columbia sent the acceptance letter. Full ride scholarship almost. There was still a gap. $15,000. It might as well have been $15 million. I sold my jewelry. My mother's engagement ring, the pearl necklace from my wedding, a vintage Cartier watch Richard had saved 6 months to buy me. I brought them to a pawn shop in the Diamond District, watched a man with a jeweler's loupe inspect my entire history, and accepted his offer without negotiating. $15,200. Nathan never knew. He thought the scholarship covered everything. I let him believe it. I wanted him to walk onto that campus feeling like he'd earned it all himself. No guilt, no debt, no looking back at his mother standing in a pawn shop trying not to cry. The Dior dress came later. Years later. I was 39, finally promoted to senior analyst. Real money for the first time in my life. I was walking past an estate sale in the West Village, one of those brownstones where old money goes to die, and there it was in the window. Vintage 1955 Dior Couture, ivory silk with hand-stitched crystals. The kind of dress Audrey Hepburn might have worn to a premiere. The kind of dress I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl watching old movies with my grandmother. $500,000. I bought it. Not because I needed it, not because I had anywhere to wear it, but because, for once, just once, I wanted to own something that proved I wasn't just surviving, I was living. I hung it in my closet in a garment bag and told myself, someday, for something special. 23 years later, something special turned out to be my son's wedding. If you've ever given everything to someone who later turned away, you'll understand this part. You'll understand why I kept believing, why I kept showing up. Why I wore that dress like armor, hoping it would somehow prove I belonged in Nathan's new world. I didn't see the cracks forming. Or maybe I did, and I just called them growing pains. Like the time Clarissa laughed at my coat, a perfectly good wool coat I'd had for 10 years, and called it vintage in a way that didn't sound like a compliment. Nathan had laughed too, nervously. The kind of laugh that says, "Please don't embarrass me in front of her." Or the birthday dinner, where I showed up with a homemade cake German chocolate, Nathan's favorite since he was 6, and Clarissa wrinkled her nose. "Oh, Briella," she'd said, "you didn't have to do that, we were just going to order from Milk Bar." She threw it away before we cut it. Nathan said nothing. Or the time I overheard him at a cocktail party I'd arrived early, he didn't see me bragging to Clarissa's father about the family dynasty he was marrying into, their real estate portfolio, their connections, their legacy. He never mentioned me. Not once. I told myself it didn't matter. He was building his future. That's what I'd raised him to do. But standing in that elevator, wine-soaked and ruined, I finally understood the truth. I had raised a son who knew how to climb. I just didn't realize he'd learn to do it by stepping on the people who lifted him up first. The doors opened. Manhattan street noise rushed in honking taxis, distant sirens, the pulse of a city that never stops moving. I stepped out into the evening air. And for the first time in 23 years, I had no idea who I was supposed to be. But I was about to find out. I went home that night still wearing the ruined dress. The doorman, sweet old Leo who'd been at my building for 15 years, looked at me with such careful neutrality that I knew he understood exactly what had happened. He didn't ask, just nodded and held the elevator button while I stepped inside. My brownstone, 4 stories in Brooklyn Heights. I'd bought it 20 years ago when the neighborhood was still up and coming before the organic markets and the yoga studios, back when you could still afford to dream in this city. It was my sanctuary. My one solid thing. I should have showered, changed, poured myself a drink. Instead, I found myself standing in Nathan's old room, the one I'd kept exactly as he left it, like some pathetic shrine to a childhood that was over. His Columbia pennant still hung on the wall. His debate team trophies lined the shelf. That's when I saw it. His tablet. The one he'd left behind last Sunday when he'd stopped by to check on me, though now I wondered if he'd been checking on the property value instead. It was sitting on his old desk, screen dark. I shouldn't have touched it. But my hands were already moving. One tap. The screen lit up. No password, he'd never changed it from his birthday. The birthday I'd celebrated alone in hospital rooms and tiny apartments, and finally here, in this house that love built. The messages were right there. Text thread. Nathan and Clarissa. I didn't mean to read them. That's a lie. I meant to read every single word. Clarissa, once she moves out, we renovate. Sell it for $3M easy. It's our starter capital. My breath caught. Nathan, she'll agree. She always folds. The room tilted. I scrolled up. Days of messages. Weeks. A blueprint of my dismantling disguised as concern. Clarissa, the wine thing worked perfectly. Now everyone thinks she's losing it wearing a dress she can't afford, making scenes, sets up the narrative. The wine thing worked. It wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Nathan, I'll talk to her about assisted living after the honeymoon. Frame it as safety. She's alone, aging, the stairs are dangerous, etc. Clarissa, your mom's sweet. Just financially clueless. This house is wasted on one person. Nathan, I know, but she's sentimental, might take time. Clarissa, we don't have time. My father says the market's perfect now. Plus, once she's in a facility, we can clear out all that old junk. Donate it. Whatever. Old junk. My mother's china, Richard's books, Nathan's baby clothes I'd saved in the attic like love letters to the past. Junk. I sat down on Nathan's childhood bed, the one I'd assembled myself because I couldn't afford delivery, and I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. Something deeper. Some foundational belief about the world. The phone in my purse buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Margaret. She'd been at the wedding. Briella, I'm so sorry about tonight. I overheard some guests talking after you left. They were unkind. Call me if you need anything. I didn't call. I opened Instagram instead. Some masochistic impulse. The wedding hashtag was already trending in our social circle. Number Clarissa and Nathan. Photos everywhere. Beautiful people in beautiful clothes having a beautiful time. And there, in the comments under a photo of the wine incident, why would someone that age wear something so expensive to someone else's wedding? Trying to upstage the bride much? Second-hand embarrassment. Know your place, lady. Someone had tagged it. Number wedding drama, number mother-in-law problems. I was a hashtag. A problem. A problem that owned a $3 million solution to their cash flow issues. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal made you question your own worth, you're not alone. I sat there in that room for 2 hours, holding a tablet full of my son's contempt, and I realized something profound. I hadn't just lost Nathan. I'd lost the version of myself that believed love was enough. That sacrifice mattered. That being good meant anything at all. Thank you to everyone who helps me tell these stories. Your support keeps this space alive for those who still believe that truth, somehow, will always find its way. Because in that moment, truth was all I had left. The house was silent. No music, no TV. Just the sound of Brooklyn at night, distant traffic, a dog barking, someone's laughter floating up from the street. I stood up slowly, placed the tablet back exactly where I'd found it, walked to my bedroom, took off the ruined Dior dress carefully, like undressing a corpse, and hung it in the closet next to all my other old junk. Then I poured myself a scotch. Neat, Richard's favorite. And I began to plan. They wanted the house? They'd get the house. Just not the way they expected. The Uber driver didn't speak, neither did I. We drove through Brooklyn in silence, past the brownstones with their glowing windows, past couples walking home from dinner, past a bodega where a man was buying flowers at midnight. Life continuing. Indifferent. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and watched the city blur. When I got home, I stood in the hallway for a long time, my keys in my hand, my reflection in the mirror by the door, a stranger in a wine-stained dress, mascara smudged, hair coming loose from its pins. I looked like someone's cautionary tale. The house was so quiet, even the walls seemed to avoid me. I walked upstairs, took off the dress, laid it flat on the bed like a body at a wake. The stain had spread deeper now, set into the silk like a bruise that wouldn't heal. I touched it once. The fabric was still damp. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I hung it back in the closet, closed the door, left it there in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea I never drank, watching it go cold in my hands. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded. I thought about calling Nathan. I didn't. What would I even say? I know you're planning to take my house. I know you think I'm junk. I know you let her pour wine on me and didn't say a word. The words felt too heavy to speak, too real. Once I said them out loud, they'd be true. And I wasn't ready for them to be true yet. So I sat there, counting the tiles on the backsplash, 36 across, 12 down, 432 tiles total. I'd installed them myself when Nathan was 10. He'd helped handing me pieces, getting grout on his nose, laughing when I accidentally stuck a tile on crooked. "Mom, it's wonky." That's called character, sweetheart. Now it was just called old. The next morning, I didn't leave the house, or the day after that. My phone sat on the counter, silent. No calls from Nathan. No apology. No mom. "Are you okay?" Nothing. Margaret texted twice. I didn't respond. What could I say? Yes, I'm fine. My son is stealing my life, but I'm absolutely fine. On the third day, I went to the grocery store. I had to, I'd run out of coffee, and living without coffee felt like admitting defeat. I saw 2 women from the wedding in the produce section. They saw me too. I watched their eyes go wide, watched them lean toward each other and whisper. One of them laughed quietly, but not quietly enough. I picked up a carton of eggs, put them in my basket, walked past them with my head up. My hands didn't start shaking until I was back in the car. If you've ever sat in a room so quiet it started to echo your thoughts, you'll understand this silence. It's not peaceful. It's suffocating. It's the kind of quiet that makes you wonder if you're disappearing, if one day you'll just fade into the walls of your own house and no one will notice you're gone. Thank you to those who help keep these stories alive. Your kindness helps give voice to people who've been forgotten, who sit alone in their pain, waiting to be seen again. I spent hours that week, just sitting. In Nathan's old room. In the living room. On the back steps. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't planning. I was just existing in the spaces where I used to matter. I washed the same coffee cup 4 times in one afternoon, not because it was dirty, because my hands needed something to do. I counted the cracks in the ceiling, 7 in the bedroom, 3 in the hall. I opened my laptop and stared at my bank account. The numbers looked smaller than they used to. Or maybe I just felt smaller. Was I really that blind? Had I been so busy loving Nathan that I'd forgotten to notice when he stopped loving me back? The questions circled like vultures. On the 5th day, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to recognize myself. The woman looking back was still me. Same eyes, same face, but hollowed out. like someone had reached inside and removed something essential. I used to be strong. I used to be someone who survived things. Now I was just someone who sat in the dark and counted tiles. My phone buzzed on the sink. I almost didn't look. Unknown number. A text. I opened it with hands that had stopped shaking because they'd forgotten how to feel anything at all. The message was short. 7 words. You should check your son's financials. I stared at the screen. Read it again. And for the first time in 5 days, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt a spark. Small, fragile, barely there. But enough. Enough to make me sit down at my laptop. Enough to make my fingers move across the keys. Enough to start searching. I didn't sleep after that text. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a notebook I hadn't touched in years, the one I used to use on Wall Street, back when due diligence was my religion. I started with the basics. Public records. Property deeds. Court filings. Clarissa's parents, the ones who'd smirked at me during the reception, who'd worn their wealth like armor, owned nothing. Less than nothing. Their Tribeca penthouse? Mortgaged to the hilt. Their family real estate empire? 3 buildings, all leveraged, all bleeding cash. I dug deeper. Lawsuit, commercial lease dispute, $2 million in damages, settlement pending, assets frozen. They were drowning. And Nathan, my careful, cautious son who'd once saved his allowance for months to buy a bicycle, had co-signed a $400,000 business loan for Clarissa's boutique. A boutique that, according to its own financial disclosures, hadn't turned a profit in 18 months. My hands stilled on the keyboard. He'd risked everything. For her. Not for me. Never for me. For her family's sinking ship. I kept searching. Old emails Nathan had sent from my computer years ago, back when he still lived here, cached files, digital breadcrumbs. And then I found it. A draft. Saved in a shared cloud folder Nathan thought I didn't know how to access. Prenuptial agreement. I clicked it open. Upon transfer or sale of parental property located at my address, proceeds to be allocated as follows. My hands started trembling. They'd already divided my house, on paper, in a legal document, like I was already gone. I scrolled down. In the event of parental relocation to assisted living or long-term care facility, property management and sale rights transfer to. My vision blurred. I stood up, walked to the window. Brooklyn stretched out before me, quiet, steady, real. If you've ever found truth in the quiet moments after pain, you know what this part feels like. It's not relief. Not yet. It's clarity. Cold and sharp and absolutely certain. Thank you to everyone who supports these stories. Your kindness keeps hope alive for people still finding their voice after betrayal. I remembered something then, 3 months ago. Clarissa had come over for brunch, one of those forced Sunday rituals Nathan had started insisting on. She'd asked for a tour. Said she wanted to really see where Nathan grew up. I'd been so pleased. So hopeful. We'd walked through every room. She'd touched everything. The banister, the crown molding, the original fixtures in the kitchen. It's charming, she'd said. So much. A potential. Her hand had lingered on the mahogany banister Richard and I had restored ourselves, our first summer in this house. She hadn't been admiring it. She'd been appraising it. I closed my laptop, picked up my phone, stared at Nathan's number. I could call him, confront him, scream, cry, beg him to explain. But I already knew the explanation. They didn't just want my house. They wanted my life's work, my history, my proof that I'd survived and built something beautiful from nothing. They wanted to erase me and call it love. I set the phone down. No, I wouldn't call. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing I'd discovered their plan. Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop, and I began to write. Not a plea. Not a defense. A strategy. Because if they wanted to play games with my legacy, they were about to learn something Wall Street taught me 30 years ago. Never underestimate the woman who built the empire you're trying to steal. She knows where all the bodies are buried. And she's been counting tiles in the dark, waiting for exactly the right moment to dig them up. There comes a point when silence stops meaning defeat. It becomes preparation. I sat at my kitchen table the next morning with a fresh pot of coffee, and the kind of clarity that only comes after you've stopped hoping someone will save you. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, the ones I'd hung myself 20 years ago, and landed on the stack of documents I'd printed overnight. 300 pages. Every financial transaction, every LLC, every shell company Clarissa's family had used to hide assets, every loan Nathan had co-signed without telling me. I'd spent 30 years on Wall Street, learning how money moves when people don't want you to see it. Turns out, you don't forget that kind of education. I took a sip of coffee. It was still hot. My phone buzzed. Nathan. Again. 5th call this morning. I let it ring. For years, I mistook generosity for love. Now, I'm learning the quiet math of self-respect. First move, I called my bank. The trust fund I'd set up for Nathan when he was 10, the one he thought would unlock when he turned 35, had a clause I'd forgotten about. Grant her discretion. My discretion. I'd like to freeze the account, I told the banker. My voice was steady. Indefinitely. May I ask why, Mrs. Morrison? Family restructuring. 2 words. That's all it took. The account, $400,000, grown from the life insurance policy Richard left us, was locked within the hour. Second move, I contacted Helen Zhang, the sharpest real estate attorney in Brooklyn. We'd worked together years ago on a commercial deal. She remembered me. I need an ironclad trust, I told her, one that protects my property from any claims, spousal, filial, or otherwise. She didn't ask questions, just said, I'll have the paperwork ready by Thursday. Third move, I opened Clarissa's boutique's public filings. Most people don't realize how much information is available if you know where to look. Tax liens, business licenses, import records. Her boutique had been claiming losses for 3 years, huge losses, the kind that trigger audits. Except there'd been no audit. I cross-referenced the expenses against her Instagram posts. Designer trips to Milan, research travel to Paris, a $90,000 consulting fee paid to her mother's LLC. It's funny how silence can sound like thunder when guilt starts to echo. I picked up my phone, not to call Nathan back, to dial a different number. The IRS tip line. I'd like to report suspected tax fraud, I said calmly. I have documentation. The woman on the other end took down the details. Business name, tax ID number, a brief summary. And your name, ma'am? I'd prefer to remain anonymous. That's fine. We'll investigate from here. I hung up and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. My phone buzzed again. Text this time. Nathan. Mom, we need to talk. Call me back. I set the phone face down on the table. Fourth move. I called an old colleague from my Wall Street days, Marcus. He'd moved into forensic accounting, the kind of work that unravels financial crimes for federal cases. I need a favor, I said. Briella Morrison. It's been what, 15 years? What do you need? A complete workup. Family finances, hidden assets, loan structures, potential fraud, everything. Whose family? I paused. Just for a second. My son's. Marcus was quiet. Then, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just be thorough. I'll have something for you in 72 hours. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat there, in my kitchen, in the house I'd bought with my own money, and I poured myself another cup of coffee. They taught me that love meant giving. Today I'm teaching myself that love can also mean stopping. My phone rang again. This time it was Clarissa. I watched it ring, watched her name light up the screen, watched it go to voicemail. She left a message. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my attorney. Subject line, Property Trust Amendment and Beneficiary Exclusion. I attached the prenup draft. I'd found the one where they'd already divided my house like it was theirs. Helen, I typed, I need this property protected from any and all future claims, including from my son. Effective immediately. My finger hovered over the send button. For the first time, I didn't need them to hear me. My silence had already spoken. I clicked send. Then I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at Brooklyn waking up. Joggers on the sidewalk. A mother pushing a stroller. The bodega owner opening his security gate. Life, continuing. Only this time, I was continuing with it. My phone buzzed one more time. A new email. From Marcus. Subject, preliminary findings, you're going to want to sit down. I smiled. Then I sat down. And I opened it. The brunch was at the River Cafe, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, white tablecloths, 80 guests in designer sundresses and tailored blazers. Clarissa's post-wedding celebration, a victory lap. I arrived 20 minutes late. I wore a simple black suit. No jewelry. Hair pulled back. The kind of outfit you wear when you don't need to prove anything. The hostess recognized me. Her eyes flickered with something pity, maybe, or curiosity, but she led me to the private dining room without a word. The conversation died the moment I walked in. 80 pairs of eyes. Nathan at the head table, Clarissa beside him in cream silk, her parents flanking them like sentries. Everyone else scattered at smaller tables, friends, family, the people who'd watched her pour wine on me and said nothing. Clarissa saw me first. Her smile was sharp, performative. "Briella!" she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I hope you brought a cheaper dress today." Laughter rippled through the room. Nervous, uncertain. I didn't smile, didn't flinch. I walked to their table and set a manila folder down in front of Nathan. Then I turned to face the room. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said. My voice was calm. Clear. "But there's something everyone should know." Nathan reached for the folder. I put my hand over it. "Not yet," I said. Clarissa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "If you're here to cause a scene..." "I'm here to tell the truth," I said, something I should have done weeks ago. The room was silent now. No clinking glasses, no whispered jokes. I looked at Nathan, my son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man I barely recognized. "3 weeks ago, I discovered that you and Clarissa had drafted a prenuptial agreement," I said, "one that included detailed plans for the sale of my home without my knowledge or consent." Nathan's face went white. "That's Clarissa started." "I'm not finished," I said. She closed her mouth. I opened the folder, pulled out the first document. "This is a loan agreement," I said, holding it up. $400,000. Co-signed by Nathan Morrison for Clarissa's Boutique, a business that has reported losses for 3 consecutive years. I set it on the table. "This," I continued, pulling out the next document, "is a tax filing from that same boutique. Notice the claim deductions. $90,000 in consulting fees paid to an LLC owned by Clarissa's mother. $50,000 in research travel to Milan and Paris." Clarissa's smile was gone. "And this," I said, placing the final page down, "is a preliminary audit notice from the IRS. Opened last week. Anonymous tip." The silence was absolute. Nathan stared at the documents like they might catch fire. Clarissa stood up. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said. My voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "You tried to steal my home. You humiliated me in public. You made my son complicit in fraud." "That's not," Nathan stammered. "It is," I said. I looked at him directly. "You co-signed a loan you couldn't afford for a business built on lies. You planned to take my house, the house I bought with money I earned, and sell it to save yourselves." Clarissa's father stood up. "This is slander." "It's documentation," I said, "and there's more. I didn't pull out Marcus's forensic report. Didn't need to. The threat was enough." The door opened. 2 men in dark suits walked in, federal badges on their belts. "Clarissa Hayes?" one of them said. She turned, color draining from her face. "We need you to come with us. We have some questions about your business filings." The room erupted. Whispers. Gasps. Someone's chair scraped against the floor. Clarissa looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at me. "Mom," he whispered. "What did you do?" I picked up the folder, held it against my chest like a shield. "I didn't throw anything," I said quietly. "I just let the truth spill." Clarissa's hands were shaking. Her mother stood up, furious, but the agents were already guiding Clarissa toward the door. Nathan grabbed my arm. "You can't do this." I pulled away. "I already did," I said. I turned and walked toward the exit. Every step felt like shedding weight, every breath, lighter. Behind me, chaos. Clarissa's mother screaming about lawyers, her father on the phone, Nathan sitting frozen, staring at documents that spelled out his complicity. I didn't look back. At the door, I paused. Turned. The room was watching me. All 80 guests. Silent now? Witnessing. For anyone wondering, I said, the wine stain never came out, but I kept the dress. Evidence. Then I walked out into the spring sunlight. The Brooklyn Bridge stretched before me, steel and stone, and 100 years of people crossing from one life to another. I stood there for a moment, feeling the river breeze. My phone buzzed. A text from Helen, my attorney. Trust is finalized, property protected. You're untouchable now. I smiled. Not victory. Not revenge. Just truth. And for the first time in months, I took a full breath. After the verdict, silence became my favorite sound. It was the sound of justice finally breathing. I didn't attend the hearings, didn't need to. Helen kept me updated via email, short, professional summaries that read like obituaries for other people's dreams. Clarissa Hayes indicted on 3 counts of tax fraud. Co-signed loan called in full. Nathan Morrison liable. Hayes family assets frozen pending investigation. I read them at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, the same way I used to read the financial section, detached, clinical. The numbers told their own story. The consequences unfolded like dominoes I'd arranged months ago, but never had to push. Clarissa's boutique closed within 2 weeks. Not because I reported her, though I had, but because once the IRS started digging, her investors fled. Turns out people don't like funding tax shelters disguised as fashion statements. The luxury condo in Williamsburg, the one with the rooftop terrace and the imported Italian marble, went on the market a month later. Foreclosure notice. I saw it on Street Easy while searching for nothing in particular. I didn't smile. Didn't feel vindicated. I just closed the laptop and poured myself more coffee. Margaret called one afternoon. My neighbor, the one who'd been at the wedding. Briella, she said carefully. I saw Clarissa yesterday. At Trader Joe's. She was. She looked different. Different how? A pause. Tired. Wearing sweatpants. No makeup. She didn't see me, but I heard her on the phone. She was crying about money. I thanked Margaret and hung up. People say Clarissa now works retail in Soho. Not managing, not designing. Just folding sweaters and forcing smiles at tourists who don't know her name used to mean something. I didn't need to ruin them. Their lies had already done that. Nathan called once, 3 weeks after the brunch. I almost didn't answer. Mom, he said, his voice was hollow. Can we talk? We are talking. In person. Please. I met him at a diner in Park Slope, neutral ground. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, the kind of thin that comes from stress, not the gym. I didn't know, he said immediately. About the tax stuff, the fraud. I swear I didn't know. I stirred my coffee. You knew you were planning to take my house. He flinched. That was Clarissa said. You'd be happier somewhere smaller, safer. I thought. You thought it would be easier to sell if I wasn't asking questions. Silence. I'm sorry, he whispered. I looked at him. My son, the boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, the man who'd co-signed away his integrity for a woman who saw him as a stepping stone. I know you are, I said. Can you forgive me? I set down my coffee cup. Someday, maybe? But not today. He nodded. Eyes red. We're separating. Clarissa and me. She blames me for everything. Says I should have handled you better. Handled me. Like I was a problem. A variable. An obstacle to be managed. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I was. Not for them. For the version of Nathan I'd raised, the one who'd believed in fairness and hard work and doing right by people. That Nathan was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for years. I stood up. Left $20 on the table. Take care of yourself, Nathan, I said. I walked out before he could respond. From a distance, I watched their world collapse in slow motion. Clarissa's parents' real estate empire declared bankruptcy. The lawsuits they'd been hiding came due all at once, a cascade of creditors who'd been patient until the IRS made them nervous. Their Tribeca penthouse sold at auction. I didn't bid. Clarissa's friends, the ones who'd laughed at my coat, who'd whispered about my cheap gifts, stopped returning her calls. I know because Margaret told me. Apparently, the social fallout was immediate and total. She posted something on Instagram, Margaret said, scrolling through her phone. A long caption about betrayal and fake friends. Very dramatic. I didn't ask to see it. They used to whisper that I'd lost my mind. now they avoided their own reflections. One evening, I was walking home from the farmer's market when I saw them. Nathan and Clarissa, standing outside a U-Haul truck parked in front of their building. Not talking, just loading boxes in bitter silence. She said something sharp. He turned away. She threw a box into the truck hard enough that something inside shattered. I kept walking. Some debts don't need to be collected. Life has its own way of balancing the books. That night, I stood in my brownstone, my home, protected now by trusts and legal walls they could never climb, and I looked at the Dior dress still hanging in my closet. The wine stain had set permanently, deep red against ivory silk, a scar that wouldn't heal. I touched it once. Then I closed the closet door. I didn't need to wear it again, didn't need to prove anything. The dress had done its job. It had shown me exactly who was willing to destroy beauty to claim power, and in showing me that, it had set me free. I walked to the window. Brooklyn stretched out before me, lights flickering on as evening fell, the bridge glowing against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Nathan was probably signing divorce papers. Clarissa was probably crying into cheap wine. Her parents were probably sitting in a half-empty apartment, calculating losses. And I was here, in the home I'd built, the life I'd earned. Whole. I didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. I just breathed. And the silence, my favorite sound, whispered back, "Justice." After the noise fades, what's left isn't victory, it's understanding. I started renovating the brownstone in late spring, not because it needed it, because I did. The attic dusty, filled with boxes of Nathan's childhood, old tax returns, things I'd saved because throwing them away felt like erasing history. I cleared it all out, donated what mattered, recycled what didn't. Then I painted it white, put in a skylight, bought an easel. I hadn't painted since college, 40 years ago, but when I stood there with a brush in my hand, looking at a blank canvas with afternoon light pouring through the glass above, something inside me exhaled. I painted what I felt, not what I saw. Abstract shapes, colors that didn't match, wine red bleeding into ivory white, then covered over with gold. It wasn't beautiful, but it was mine. Justice isn't about watching them fall. It's about standing again without hate. I started volunteering at the senior center in Fort Greene, Tuesdays and Thursdays, teaching financial literacy, how to read a contract, how to spot elder abuse, how to protect your assets when family stops feeling like family. The first class, 12 people showed up, mostly women, mostly alone. One woman, Dorothy, 78, with kind eyes and shaking hands, stayed after. "My son wants me to sign over my house," she said quietly. "Says it's for tax purposes. But something feels wrong." I sat down next to her. "Have you seen the paperwork?" She shook her head. "He says I don't need to worry about details." I took her hand. "Dorothy, if someone who loves you asks you to sign something, they'll want you to understand it first, not after." She started crying. Not sad tears. Relief tears. "I thought I was being paranoid," she whispered. "You're not paranoid," I said. "You're awake." I helped her find a lawyer, a good one. Last I heard, her house is in an ironclad trust, and her son hasn't spoken to her in months. She sends me Christmas cards now. I used to believe love meant giving everything. Now I know love also means knowing when to stop. One evening I was sitting on the back steps with a glass of wine, not Bordeaux, just something cheap and cold from the corner store, when I found myself talking out loud. To Richard. My husband. Dead 27 years. But still, somehow, the person I needed to hear me. "I finally did what you would have wanted," I said to the empty air. "I chose peace over pride." The wind moved through the garden. The neighbors' wind chimes sang. I closed my eyes. "I don't hate him, Richard. Nathan. I don't. I'm sad for him. Sad for the man he could have been. But I can't carry that anymore." Silence. Then softer. "I forgive him. Not because he deserves it, because I deserve to be free." The tears came then, quiet. Clean. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else, it's a door you open for yourself. I started writing my memoir in June, not for publication, just for me, a way to make sense of the pieces. I called it When Silence Fights Back. Some days I wrote for hours, other days, just a sentence. But slowly, The story took shape not as a tragedy, but as a journey. From blindness to sight. From giving to choosing. From victim to architect. One chapter I kept rewriting. If my story teaches anything, it's this. Kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. I read it out loud to the empty studio. Let it settle in the air. Then I saved the file and closed the laptop. If you've ever lost yourself trying to love someone who only saw your worth in numbers, I hope my story reminds you, it's never too late to choose yourself. Thank you for keeping these stories alive, stories where justice doesn't shout, it heals. By August, the brownstone felt different, lighter. The walls didn't hold memories anymore. They held possibility. I hung my paintings in the hallway. Imperfect, raw, honest. I planted tomatoes in the back garden, watched them grow. I joined a book club, made friends who didn't know Nathan's name, didn't care about my past, only cared that I showed up and laughed at the right parts. One Sunday morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about the wedding in 3 days. The wine-stained dress still hung in my closet. I walked past it every morning. Sometimes I touched it. A reminder, not of what I lost, but of what I survived. I thought about donating it, thought about burning it. In the end, I kept it. Because some scars aren't meant to disappear, they're meant to prove you're still here. I stood on my front stoop one October evening, watching the light fade over Brooklyn. The bridge glowed in the distance. Joggers passed. A couple walked by holding hands. Somewhere, a dog barked. Life, ordinary, beautiful. I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally truly mine again. Family doesn't end in betrayal. Betrayal ends the moment you choose yourself. Forgiveness is optional. Dignity is not. I went inside, made tea, sat in my studio under the skylight as stars began to appear, and I painted. Gold, silver, ivory, light emerging from darkness. Justice had given me back my name, but peace gave me back myself.